Kelly Quinlan, Yahoo and Rivals, covers Georgia Tech football, but college football in general. He is in Dublin, Ireland. That's where Saturday's game, Florida State, Georgia Tech, will be played. And by the way, Kelly, before we start, don't give away any of those secret plays, because we have an FSU alum who's a part of this show who will absolutely contact Mike Norvell, knowing him the way we do. So thanks for your time. What's it like in Dublin?
It's quite blustery. It's about 60 degrees and howling winds. So about what you'd expect for this time of year. It's going to be pretty cool on a Saturday evening here in Dublin.
Kelly, what is the biggest thing that Georgia Tech has improved on after a surprising season last year to this year, you think?
They're really good on offense last year. I think the defense has taken a big step forward with Tyler Santucci, the new defensive coordinator. Mike Elko, disciple. Sure, you guys talk a lot about what's going on at A&M these days, and kind of that defensive philosophy of being attacking, being aggressive on defense, and trying to be more downhill, I think, and that's a big thing that Tyler Santucci is bringing to the table. They're trying to be more physical and attacking instead of just reacting. And the defense last year, I think, was very predicated on let's try to make some turnovers, strip the football, make some big plays, but they were not as good at fundamentals and down, run stopping, run fits, things like that. I think the defense has made huge strides there.
Kelly, Haynes King, back for another year in the saddle, had some really good moments last year, turned the ball over a bit too much at times, certainly, but I don't know, seems like he's poised in kind of the head of the spear here. If Georgia Tech has a big year, just what's the kind of excitement level around him, and what's the expectations just as far as what people want to see and need to see from him this year?
Funny, Brent Key went so far as to say he's the best quarterback in the ACC.
Okay.
So the expectations are ratcheted up pretty high. I think, people forget with Haynes, he played at A&M, yes, but he didn't play a lot. Like, he got hurt a game and a half into his first season, then kind of was benched in that really weird 2022 season. Just hadn't played a lot until last year. So he made a lot of what we call young guy mistakes, forcing the ball in the coverage, maybe relying too much on pre-snap reads with what the defense was doing, forcing balls. And, it's not high school anymore, and I think it took a little bit of adjustment. And I think his run game came along as well. He got a little healthier, and he was really dynamic as kind of a dual threat guy. I think the big evolution for him is just eliminating those dumb turnovers. He had quite a few just forced throws that were bad decisions on his part. And if he can clean that up, I think they're in for a huge step forward for him. And I think he definitely has a chance to be in that conversation with one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC if he does that.
Well, one of the things he did in high school at Longview, he was a gunslinger. He was not afraid to try to, throw it through a keyhole, and then that got him at A&M as well. Is that just kind of also, even if he tries to avoid that more often, that's just his style? When he plays well, that's what he does?
Yeah, Chris Winkie, the quarterback's coach who played at Florida State, won the Heisman there, knows a thing or two about quarterback play.
Yeah.
And he compared him to Brett Favre. He said that he's like that kind of guy. Like, he's gonna, he's gonna screw up every once in a while, but he's gonna make some amazing plays. You kind of live with it because of the ups that he will bring you as, like you said, a gunslinger. And you don't want to take that aggressiveness away. And that's a big thing Lester Faulkner, the offensive coordinator, talked about too. Like, don't take away what makes him special. You want to figure out how to make him make better decisions in those situations, but you also don't want to take away the aggressiveness.
How do you think this game will play out stylistically? Florida State's offense will probably look a little bit different than it did last year, given the fact that they lost a ton of their skill players, maybe more running the game. Do you think that they're going to try to run with Florida State, or do you think that this will be maybe more of a tug of war?
I think this is going to be a tug of war. I was here in 2016 when Georgia Tech played Boston College. I've watched quite a few of these games over the years. All the ones except for when Navy's played in this game and been overmatched have been just absolute slugfest. Games that were won in the fourth quarter, a lot of low-scoring games. The weather can be dicey. It's going to be kind of probably in the 50s by the time the game really gets going. And these guys they've been practicing in 90-plus degree temperatures for the last month. So it's just going to be a different animal. And I think the whole vibe is just totally different than anything. Maybe other than like some of those weird COVID games that teams play with no fans. Other than that, I think it's just so weird. The environment, it's sort of like being in a bowl game where they play in a baseball stadium or something. It just is very different than a normal college football game. So I think there's going to be a lot of adjustments. And then, you have Florida State with so many replacement players on their team. I'm curious what that all looks like too.
Do you feel like that they're over there now? They started workouts. I think I saw even video of Florida State practicing. Are 2 days of practice and then maybe whatever they do on Friday enough to get used to the surroundings?
So I think everybody's coming over tonight,
okay.
leaving tonight.
Okay.
And I know Tech gets in tomorrow morning. I'm pretty sure Florida State does too. I think they have that all set up. But yeah, so they'll come in Thursday morning. Basically, everybody will do like a walkthrough kind of practice, and that's it. There's not really. A couple of years ago, they were here for like almost a week. I think they decided to make it less like a bowl game and more like just kind of one-off special experience. So they trimmed down the time. The jet lag's weird. You just either you sleep or you don't on the plane, and you make yourself stay up when you get here and adjust to the time, and that's all you can do.
Kelly Quinlan with us on 365 Sports on Georgia Tech football.
Kelly, is Georgia Tech deep enough? Should they, let's say they start out and win this game, are they deep enough to make a run and be in the ACC title game at the end of the year?
So, what I've said since the beginning of the year is if the offense plays at a similar pace to a year ago, the defense was like bottom. It was literally like the second worst defense in the ACC. So if they jump to 75 nationally, 70, I think that puts them on the bubble. The problem for Georgia Tech is the non-conference schedule is a little rough. You have Notre Dame and Georgia at Georgia to end the season on Black Friday. So I think that, nationally that'll hurt their ranking, but I absolutely think they have an opportunity in the ACC. They just have a harder slate. If you look at how they split the votes in the preseason in the ACC, Georgia Tech plays like 7 of the top 8 teams. And most of the other teams that are being picked as favorites don't. So they have a tougher schedule on paper, but again, those things tend to kind of cancel themselves out as the season goes on, whether it's Miami or whoever kind of falls on their face early in the year. And then those games become less hard as the season goes on. So I think no one really knows because of the portal now. It's much harder to handicap all these things in the preseason, but they absolutely have a very good offense and a very good special teams unit, and the defense should be much improved. And I think that's a good recipe to get yourself in the mix for Charlotte.
Anytime we've had somebody who covers, writes, columnist, or broadcaster of the ACC or a team in the ACC, we ask them about what has been a tumultuous offseason. Can't wait for games to be played, so that will be the focus no matter what happens with the ACC and the Florida State, Clemson, et cetera. How much of that even resonates with Atlanta, Georgia, and Georgia Tech?
I think everyone's kind of actively following along with what has been going on, but most people kind of see it for what it is. These are long-term plays. Like Florida State's making a long-term play to get out of the league. Nothing's going to happen for years. This is going to be a prolonged legal battle. There's zero incentive for the ACC to settle with them, and no one's going to touch them until their rights are clear. Because it basically forces any other league, if you start to invalidate the grant of rights, it would put pure chaos basically for every other league, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen, I think everyone's kind of watching it, but the reality is Georgia Tech and Atlanta, if they're decent in football, the basketball team's getting better, they will have a seat at one of the 3 big tables if it were to, devolve into 3 power conferences and you have some sort of weird merger of the ACC and Big 12, and then some teams peel off to the SEC and Big 10. I think they have a seat at one of those 3 tables, just because of where they are, the history, and what they can bring to the table. So that's sort of where Georgia Tech fans are in it. I think ultimately everyone would like to see the ACC kind of figure things out, but I think it's very difficult to do. You guys just saw that with the Big 12 and Texas and Oklahoma. If you start catering to teams, it kind of basically ruins the conference, and they're trying to avoid that, I think, right now with Clemson and Florida State.
What do you mentioned the history. They have a fantastic history that I think a lot of people, don't realize, because post 1990, they haven't won a national title, but they were good for, deep into the 90s, into the early part of the 2000s, and then they've had little patches of good stretches. But has there been a reason for the downshift in football from a leadership perspective of the university that's maybe now just getting restarted, or were they just, maybe caught kind of flat-footed like a lot of universities are in the arms race?
So there was sort of a two-folded issue. The first one was when George O'Leary was here, right before he left taking the Notre Dame job, he convinced them to expand the stadium. They took on basically $200 million in debt to do this, and created a stadium that was too large for the fan base. Okay. So that wasn't even paying for itself. Then that debt turned into this thing that kept getting rolled into more debt and more debt. And then around the time that Paul Johnson got hired, the AD at the time was so worried about the debt, he basically became very cheap with everything they did. And so that's why I hired Paul Johnson. That's why they cheaped out on defensive coordinators. They made lots of these penny-pinching decisions for about a span of, 10 years. And there was a change in leadership, and the change in the school president. The AD got fired. Several ADs have been processed during that time. And now they have sort of an aligned AD president, and the two coaches in the main sports are actually having success on the field and recruiting well. So it's basically the first time, I've covered them since 2009. It's the first time I've really seen this since my first year on the beat, where things are somewhat aligned and they actually have positive momentum. But one was just, financially driven issues. And the other thing was the rise of the SEC. And that kind of killed a lot of the recruiting, just the hype around the SEC and all that stuff. And then things like huddle and having people recruit Atlanta harder and the state of Georgia harder over the last 10, 15 years also impacted recruiting for teams like Georgia Tech. But even if you step down a level, Georgia Southern or those type of schools all felt impact from the way recruiting has become more nationalized for every team in the country.
Kelly, you were in France prior to flying into Dublin, right?
France, Switzerland, and Italy.
So how long have you been out of the country?
I left on the 17th, I think, something like that.
Oh, so that's almost a month. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, just got a little vacation in.
Do you miss America yet? Or, it sounds like you've been to some pretty awesome places.
Yeah, I spent, yesterday I was in the Matterhorn in Switzerland. I think it's 13,000 feet up, on a glacier. So, I'm doing okay right now. I think, by the end of the week, I'll miss my kids, and my wife just left to go back to America to take care of the kids. So, I'll probably miss her too by that point. But yeah, right now I'm still doing okay.
That's a great trip.
We don't have glaciers, but
you can get trying to make something special.
But you can get a big gulp with a bunch of ice, so that's kind of the same.
It's funny, man. They give you ice here. It's like 3 little tiny cubes of ice. If you get ice, and you're lucky if you get ice. It's like what you would get at, not even in a bar. It's like if you were you walked to the end at a party and someone had an ice container. That was what was left in the bottom of the ice container at the end of the party. That's what you get in your glass.
We had Liam Rooney on, who covers Florida State for the Tallahassee Democrat, and he was in a scrum, I guess, before they left for Dublin, among other members of the media, and there was a debate about McDonald's. And he says that McDonald's, like the chicken nuggets, are better in Ireland than they are even in the country that discovered and invented McDonald's because of the chicken and how fresh it is when they get it.
Yeah, so there's rules in France, things have to be a certain distance from where you are to be cooked in a restaurant. It was just totally different than there's no like extruded chicken goo like they make the McNuggets out of in America. Like, and it's not, and I'm not knocking it. I like some chicken McNuggets, but but it is totally different. The eating is completely different. Like it's like little small meals. You walk everywhere. I have car rentals here, and have driven, but I've done a ton of walking. I move over 10,000 steps every day, just walking around doing stuff. So I see why like we're fat Americans and like everyone's skating in Europe and stuff. I get it now. Like, but it is very funny to see the differences and like just the lifestyle and like how more laid back a lot of people are and stuff about things. So it is just a very different culture.
Good for you, man. What a great trip, memorable trip. And now you got a football game. The season begins. You're going to be a part of it by covering Florida State, Georgia Tech in Dublin. Hey, thanks for your time, Kelly. Great feedback on where you are, where you've been, and also what we have coming up this weekend. Have a great week, the rest of the week there.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Kelly Quinlan with us from Rivals and also Yahoo Sports covering college football and also Georgia Tech.